Well, hey, we took last week kind of off. We were on Mother's Day, which I imagine most of you were too last week. And that kind of put a bridge or a little halftime in between the series that we're in. And so while we're finishing up the offering, let's recap the first 2 weeks of our series and then jump into today.
Well, our series has been climate change, and it is all about relationships. So a couple of weeks ago, we started out talking about the fact that all of us have a collection of relationships, and all of those relationships have a climate. There's a climate in our friendships, there's a climate in our workplaces, there's a climate even here at church. And one of the principles that we discovered within this climate change is that climate dictates the forecast. So if, again, I show you a relationship or friendship that is has the climate of being cold and hostile and distant, you can pretty well predict the forecast of that relationship. Just as a friendship and a relationship that's warm and inviting and mutually, nice, you can predict that that's probably going to have a positive forecast. So not only does climate dictate the forecast. This seems just really kind of weird. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm not sure what
like
this climate is.
Each other all
I
week.
know, kind of nice. Okay, I know.
There, I feel much better. Just want to be transparent
We're professionals.
with all of you.
We are professionals.
We
okay.
are, yeah.
Had a youth ministry moment
See,
there.
all of our
Once
student
again.
ministry people, they'll get that. When we've said we're professionals, we
Professionals.
know what we're doing.
Yes.
Nobody else is going, what are they talking
Yeah,
about?
I know.
We'll get to that subject in February.
Okay, so anyways, what we've learned also is that within all of our relationships that need a climate change, unless and until the climate changes, the forecast will remain the same. So not only do our friendships and relationships all have a climate, but you and I, we have a climate. But the hard part is that we don't always see our climates. And so the challenge that first week was for you to pick at least 3 people that you would sit down with and just say, hey, what is it like to be on the other side of me? I hope you guys have taken us up on that. I did, Greg did, I certainly hope some others of you did at least smile and make me think that, you
We know it's risky, but we really challenge you to take some time to do that.
And I hope that you, again, were able to begin at least making strides towards resolving or having a different climate within that relationship. So then week 2, Greg talked about the fact that there are climate shapers and climate influencers within all of our relationships, and that is the wonderful area of insecurity. And we learned a couple weeks ago that all of us, to varying degrees, we all have insecurity. And the cure for insecurity is beginning to see ourselves the way God sees us. And when we see ourselves as God sees us, we gain the greatest gift of all, and that is acceptance. Acceptance is the cure for insecurity. And when we understand that we are dearly loved, fully, completely, entirely accepted by our loving, gracious God, we then are able to extend acceptance to others as we deal with relationships that are flooded with insecurities. And so the challenge that we left us with a couple weeks ago was simply asking this question: who am I trying Whose acceptance am I trying to achieve? So hopefully that's brought us up to speed, and here we are this morning.
Well, you can actually go back to the website and see all the previous messages because, all right, here's what happens, and this is off script, so don't follow it. Every week we sit up here and I look out at all of you, and you're a good-looking group. But our challenge is to not just sit up here and give verbiage so you can all sit through a service and say, great, we went to church today, and go out and golf and do whatever you're going to do today. We really feel our challenge through the series and even for today is to give you something to go home and say, this will help improve my life. This will help improve my relationships. This will help improve my God relationship. So it's really kind of important that you go back and have that conversation of what's it like to be on the other side of me. I know that's a tough conversation because I did it with several people. And it has to be kind of a safe environment, but I'm literally looking, what's it like? I've never been on the other side of me other than a mirror, and that doesn't really count, but what's it like? And then as Sherry said 2 weeks ago, we talked about whose acceptance are you really trying to achieve? Go back, watch the messages, but don't just watch the messages. Take this stuff and act it out, because today, the topic we're going to talk about today is a big topic. In fact, you can't talk about relationships without talking about what we're going to talk about this morning. And because what happens when what we're going to talk about this morning is not dealt with, when it's not resolved, is our relationships can go flat. Our relationships can actually begin to dissipate in a road. Because we've already talked about one climate changer and influencer shaper. That was insecurities 2 weeks ago. Here's the other big climate influencer and shaper. It's conflict. Conflict. Right now, this is an all-play moment. By a show of hands, How many of you in the room have had conflict in a relationship? Make sure you get your hand up. Really, so there's a lot of people over here who've had no conflict in their life, which is
Wow.
great.
Can I sit at
We're
your
going to
feet?
change that today. Michael's deaf. You can put it down now, Mike. We know. That show of hands is the very reason why we've got to talk about it. Because here's the deal. All of us know what it's like to be in a relationship where conflict is handled well. We know what it's like to be in a relationship where it's brought up and where it's addressed and where it's resolved. Even last night I was texting one of my very good friends out in Pennsylvania, and he said, "Hey, Greg, I just need to let you know, we've been doing their premarital counseling by Skype." Not the best way to do premarital counseling, but he said, "Hey, I just want you to know I've been kind of disappointed in what's been going on in our counseling relationship." And he said, "For the sake of our friendship, I just needed to let you know." And I said, "Chris, thanks so much, man. Suck it up." That's not what I wrote. I wrote and said, "I'm so glad you brought that up, Chris, because it'd be so easy to kind of sweep it under the rug and go, it's not that big of a deal." We all know what it's like to be in relationships where conflict has been resolved, where it's been addressed, where it's been dealt with well. That relationship, most of the time, gets strengthened. It gets strengthened as a result of working through conflict. But yet all of us have been in relationships and friendships where it's not been addressed at all, where it's been ignored or where it's been repressed. And the result is that relationship becomes very stale and takes a very negative tone. And in a lot of cases, it just begins to go away. So the truth is we're going to experience conflict, and we know what it's like to be in a relationship where it's done well, where it's resolved well, and we know what it's like to be in relationships where it's not addressed at all. Now, here's kind of the interesting thing about conflict. For some reason, conflict always seems to take a negative tone with all of us. Like whenever conflict arises, it seems to carry negative tones. We begin to think, oh, something's wrong with me, there's something wrong with us. We go through this whole litany of reasons on why it's our fault. So for some reason, conflict always takes a negative turn. Now, I was in a long-term relationship in college before I met Sherry. In fact, I was engaged to this girl that I dated for 2.5 years in college. Great girl. And as we started to date, she came from a home where she rarely, if ever, saw mom and dad fight. I mean, rarely, if ever. Now, I come from a family that's kind of the same way, and my parents are watching today, so I love you both, but I rarely, if ever, saw my mom and dad engage in conflict. I mean, if they did that, they did it behind closed doors, unlike the two of us. But anyways, because we both came from family situations where we rarely saw conflict between our parents, when conflict started to arise in our dating relationship, we began to think something's wrong. And because we were at a Christian college, we began to ask things like, this must not be the person God has for me, must not be God's will, all those churchy things we go through. After 2.5 years, we ended our relationship. We were engaged. We ended our relationship because we didn't know, number one, that conflict was inevitable, and worse yet, we didn't know how to work through it. In fact, I didn't really know how to work through conflict until I started dating her.
You're welcome.
I know. When I started dating Sherry, I realized, hey, conflict is inevitable. I'd had enough track record by this point to see somehow in every relationship I have, conflict arises. It must be me. I realized conflict was inevitable, and you have one of two choices. You either work through it or you ignore it altogether. And here's the reason why conflict is going to happen. You ready? The reason you're going to have conflict, the reason I'm going to have conflict is very, very simple. It's not because you're screwed up, messed up. I mean, that's true too, but the reason we're all going to have conflict is that we are all unique human beings, individuals with our personal temperaments, with our personal approaches to life, with different ways of looking at things. And the reason that we're made that way is that because God has put us together that way. We're uniquely crafted. And if you're going to have a relationship today on any front, whether it's at work, whether it's a school relationship, whether it's here at church, whether it's in a life group, any kind of relationship, married, single, listen, write it down. Conflict is going to happen. It's going to happen.
Well, Greg and I have been married for 23 and a half years and a month, I think. Anyways, doesn't really matter. But
well, it does matter. I mean, it's nice.
Okay. The very things that drew us together, we had a lot of similarities, a lot of same passions, all those things that drew us together. That we have a lot of things that are alike. but we also are so different. And and this is just going to sound really silly, but this is one of the things that we dealt with very early on that was very different. I am an extrovert. I love to be with people. When I'm with people, I fuel, I energize. When I'm alone, I just feel like, I don't know how to do, I don't know if it's a twin thing or what, because I never was alone. I didn't get the womb to myself. So I've always had somebody.
I never tire hearing that joke.
And then there's Greg, who comes across as an extrovert, but is an introvert.
Yeah, no, you people suck the life out
And when
of
he's
me.
with people, he gets drained. So here we are, newlyweds, newly married, and I'm at home alone all day, dying to be with someone. He's with people all day, dying to get away from them. So then you bring the two of us together, ooh, people, and he's like, no people. I'm like, yay, people. And it was just chaos. It didn't go well. Our first couple of, years were really
It's called post-marital counseling.
Yes, thank the Lord.
It's called.
So we're just very different as well as similar.
We are, because when you have two people that have two different temperaments and two different outlooks on life, conflict is just going to happen. But here's the point. You got to make sure you get this today, and you got to make sure you write this down. So Tyson, if you're tweeting, which you do, get your phone out. Make sure you write this down. Here, watch this. The goal of our relationships is not the absence of conflict. Let me say that again. The goal of our relationships is not the absence of conflict. The goal of our relationships is when conflict happens, which it will, how do we respond? What do? What's our course of action? So here's our big idea. We also want to make sure you get this for the day. Those of you who have been playing along with us the last couple of weeks know that every week we have a big idea. This is the one thing we want to make sure you go away with or you have for the day. So you'll again write this down, tweet this, get this out. Here's the big idea for the day. The climate of our relationships improves when conflict is what? It's on the screen. When conflict is resolved and not ignored. The climate of our relationships improves when conflict is resolved and not ignored.
All right, so the bottom line for all of us is that when conflict happens, there are generally two types of people: conflict engagers and conflict avoiders. And without going any further, you already know which one you are, right? Okay, so let me address the conflict engager first. Conflict engagers are the ones that the minute you heard we were talking about conflict, we're like, yeah, let's go. You've got your thoughts, you've got your opinions, you know what you want to say, you know what you want to be. You are ready to dive in. There is no conflict that you will avoid. You love to engage in it, not just for the sake of the fight, but hopefully it is also because you love to resolve things. But you've got your opinions, you want to be heard, and you know how to do this. And so as a conflict engager, you are one who readily, easily, almost enthusiastically looks forward to a conflict. Well, I get that, and that makes a lot of sense, but let me just give a little bit of pushback. For those of us, and I'm not 100% a conflict engager. I am only really, truly a conflict engager with him. Yeah, I'm not going around picking fights with everybody out here.
Wow.
It's just him.
It's just me.
Okay, so anyways, we're keeping it real, folks, keeping it real.
Let's edit these parts out, Chris.
Yeah. Okay, the problem that exists sometimes with conflict engagers is that the potential is real to shut down the other person on the other side of you when you're trying to engage in the conflict. Because usually what happens is you've got your opinion, you've got your thoughts, you're sharing it all, and you have no problem getting it all out there. But especially if the other side is a conflict avoider, what tends to happen is all those words and all that thought and opinion just kind of shuts them down. Maybe you've experienced something like that. So the result is not that the relationship and the conflict is getting resolved. It usually gets ignored because you go, I'll just be quiet so that you can, not create any more of a problem. And then the relationship continues to be chilly, if not just downright cold. So that can be a conflict engager.
Well, let me talk to conflict avoiders, and I can speak on this with great confidence because I am one. I'll just be flat out honest. It's one of my weaknesses. It's one of the things that I've had to deal with my entire life. And because we don't like conflict, right? You guys that are conflict avoiders, we like for there to be peace, and we like for everybody to get along. And to some extent, that's a good thing. Just like to be in a conflict engager to some extent is a good thing. But just like anything else, to an extreme, it's not good. In fact, I heard Andy Stanley is one of my favorite authors. He's a pastor and communicator out of Atlanta, and he told pastors this. He said, if you pastors will preach out of your weaknesses, you will never run out of material. Listen, just for me alone, you people are set for life. I mean, you're just set. So I'll just confess, this has been a weakness for me, but it's also something I've realized over the last couple of years especially, that I have had to work on and I have had to engage with. Because here's what I've discovered as a conflict avoider. My initial reaction when conflict happens is to do one of two things, either to retreat or to resign altogether. And it's easy for me when conflict happens to just kind of write off in my head, you know what, it's not that big of a deal, just suck it up, just let it go. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Everybody just busted into a Disney tune, right? It's just easy for me to think it'll solve itself, just don't worry about it. But here's what I've realized. If you and I continually take that approach to conflict, the result is, whether we realize it or not, that we can only have superficial relationships at best. We really don't get into the genuineness of relationships because we're not addressing things that really need to be addressed. We're not dealing with real issues. We're keeping things right here because there's peace there and we like everybody there, but we're not willing to get into the deeper issues because conflict is going to happen. And one of the things, this is kind of interesting as well. Sherry and I, as I said, we do marriage counseling, or we've done a lot of marriage counseling. And in our counseling, we've sat down with couples and said, the findings show, I don't know who does the findings, so don't call me out on that, but the findings show that the couples who argue the most out in front of each other and have it out have a higher rate of success in their marriages than those who don't. Look at couples, they're all going, yeah, we're going to be here for a while. Other couples are just doing this. Statistics show that those of us who have it out, that engage in conflict, have a higher rate of success than those who don't. And here's the reason why. The reason why is because sometimes love requires us to fight. Right? Sometimes love requires us to fight. So today we're going to talk about how to fight. This is a great thing. Guys are going to love this. But we're going to talk about how to fight well because conflict is inevitable.
Well, this morning we want to look at just two verses that come from our Heavenly Father through one of the wisest men who ever lived, and his name was Solomon. He is the son of King David and Bathsheba, and he ruled Israel between 970 and 931 BC. And he is one of a handful of authors that wrote the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is an awesome book. It is filled with one-liners. It is filled with anecdotes, filled with very practical things of how to live the best life possible. And Solomon has no problem dealing with and writing for us about relationships and conflict.
All right, so Proverbs chapter 3, if you have your Bibles with you, congratulations. Nobody usually carries them with them anymore. I'm glad that you did. Most of you are pulling out your phones right now. I want you to pull up Proverbs chapter 3. It will be on the screens as well, but just two verses, but hey, there's a lot in these two verses that we really want to get into. So Proverbs chapter 3, we're going to begin in verse 3, and we're going to unpack this because there's a principle at work here that's to your advantage and to the benefit of people around you. Here's what Solomon writes in Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 3. He says, never let loyalty and kindness leave you! Exclamation point. Never let loyalty and kindness leave you. Tie them around your neck as a reminder. Write them deep within your heart. So Solomon says, hey, carry these two things into your life. Carry these two things, kindness and loyalty. And as you write them on your heart and as you carry them into your relationships, something really powerful is going to happen. And that something powerful comes in verse 4. Look what he says in verse 4. If you carry loyalty and kindness, then you will find favor with both God and people, and you will earn a good reputation. Okay, here's something I think I know about you, and I definitely know about me, and that is that we all enjoy favor with people, right? Especially if you're a firstborn. Favor with people is something that we want, and I think that's something that you want as well. Here's something I also know about you and know about me. That second thing is something I really want too. I want a good reputation, and I believe you do as well. And Solomon says this. He says, with all the wisdom that God has given to me, in all the observations I've made about life, one of the observations that I've made about relationships is this, that if you will engage in verse 3, the benefits will happen in verse 4. Now, it's not a promise. There's probably some relational exceptions along the way, but Solomon is saying for the most part, if you want favor with God and people, if you want to have a good reputation, then you better exhibit the qualities of loyalty and kindness. Loyalty and kindness. All right, so loyalty and kindness. Now, I got to be honest with you. If I had been writing this passage, if I had been writing this verse on conflict, I don't think I would have chosen the word loyalty. I mean, I kind of get why kindness is in there. That makes a little bit of sense to me. But if I had been writing this verse, I probably would have written something like, make sure you carry around you honesty or integrity or courage. There's better words than loyalty in my book. That's just being honest with you. So as we were getting ready for the message and I sat down, I had to ask myself the question, why then would Solomon write loyalty? Why did he specifically choose that word? And as I've thought about it and kind of digested it and thought it through, I have to tell you, as a conflict avoider, this verse, and particularly that word loyalty, has changed how I am approaching and how I'm going to approach conflict. And here's how. Watch this. Whenever there's conflict in any of my relationships, whenever there's conflict, and my tendency, as I told you earlier, is to retreat, if not resign, altogether. When that happens, when I have conflict and I'm tempted to go that direction, I have to think this: I'm not being loyal. I'm not being loyal. I'm being a disloyal husband, or I'm being a disloyal friend, or I'm being a disloyal leader, whatever it may be, I'm being disloyal. For instance, when there's conflict, which happens every now and then in my marriage, probably will happen this afternoon, after this morning, we'll go home and have it out. My tendency is most of the time to go, she'll get over it. Just let enough time go. She'll blow off steam. She'll find something. She'll go to life group and complain all about me. But she'll be better and she'll come home. I got to start thinking, if I allow that to happen, if I don't address it, I'm being disloyal to her as a husband. And Sherry deserves better than that. When there's conflict on any of the ministry teams that I've led in the past, or even some of the current ones we have here at 321, yes, hard to believe, we've already had conflict spring up here at Church 321. And my tendency as a leader to go, you know what, that will resolve itself. By the way, conflict rarely, if ever resolves itself. But my tendency is to go, you know what, let's not talk about it. I'll get somebody else to deal with it. I have to begin thinking I'm being a disloyal leader. I'm being a disloyal pastor. When conflict comes up in my friendships and I think, yeah, who am I to tell them about that? Who am I to kind of get involved in their life and step into their life? I'm being a disloyal friend. Whenever there's conflict in any of my relationships, it's just easy for me to take a step back and retreat, but I got to begin thinking, I'm not being loyal. I'm not being loyal. I'm being honest with you. This verse, Proverbs 3:3, has been a call to action for me. And that verb, particularly that word loyalty, has been a call to action as a conflict avoider. Now, in the workplace, let's kind of shift this idea. Let's talk about conflict, but let's talk about it in the workplace. Because in the workplace, as you saw so eloquently illustrated in the opening clip from The Office, where Michael wisely deals with conflict and gets a win-win for everybody, in the workplace, learning how to resolve conflict is absolutely essential. And if you're here today and you're a leader or a boss or a manager, you're here today and you're an employee, it is important for us to understand how to do conflict resolution. Because if conflict resolution isn't done well at the workplace, then the chances are that you're probably working in a dysfunctional environment. Because there's a good chance that people around you are acting like nothing's really wrong and pretending like everything's all right and the real issues aren't being addressed, but day in, day out, things just keep rolling and things never get done, but we just kind of put off like there is. If conflict management's not being done well, conflict resolution's not being done in the workplace on a good level, then chances are you're in a dysfunctional home. So today, or workplace. So today, if you're here today and you're a manager, a leader, or boss, even if you're an employee, here's what we need to do. We need to sit down with the people that are with us and say something like this. You know what? As someone who you report to, I just want you to know today that my goal for you as your leader is for you to be as successful as you possibly can be. I have said that already to our volunteer staff here. My goal is for you to be the most successful arts director, the most successful program director, the most successful children's director. My goal is that you be the most successful person that you can be. Now, that being said, one of the things it's going to require is that I have to have difficult conversations with you. It just requires that we're going to have difficult conversations. And in these conversations, there's a good chance I'm going to say something that hurts your feelings. There's a really good chance I'm going to say something that you don't necessarily agree with. But the reason I have to have this conversation with you is because I am loyal to you. I'm loyal to you. I'm behind you. I am for you. I want you to succeed. And when we have these difficult conversations, you just have to know this. I am not against you. I'm always for you. Now think about this for a second. If the conversations in the workplace where you work and where I live could start that way, how different of a climate would that create for the conversations we have to have? Right? Because most of the time we come in thinking they're against me, they're just trying to get me out, and maybe in some cases that's true. But our approach just needs to be, I'm here to champion you. I'm here to help you be successful. Now that's the workplace. Let me shift to everyday, day in, day out conversations. And guys, I'm going to begin with us by picking on you because guys, we suck at this for the most part. We just do. Let's just be honest. We have to really work at this because one of the primary things that the women in our lives want, and you heard Sherry talk directly about this last week. One of the primary things the women in our relationships want is this. They want to know that you and I are willing to fight for the relationship. Right? Those of us who were here last week heard Sherry say that. They want to know that you and I, we men, are willing to fight for the relationship. But watch this, this is important. And by fighting for the relationship, they want us to fight in the relationship. It seems like she's picking a fight. You're right, she is. Because a lot of times to fight for the relationship, we have to fight in the relationships. They're just looking for us to engage with them. So whether you're dating today, whether you're engaged today, whether you're married already, it's just important for us to understand that you're going to have to fight in the relationship to fight for the relationship. But if our approach, if our communication, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, is always, I don't want to talk about it, I don't have time for it, this is all about you, this is not a big deal. If that's the constant vibe we are giving off as guys, I'm telling you, they're translating it as this. He's being disloyal to me. He's being disloyal. And here's what I know about all of us guys, all right? I know that for the most part, every guy in this room grew up putting a cape on our back, wanting to be Batman or Superman. Or in my case, there was no cape because I wanted to be the Flash. And the Flash knew that a cape would mean wind resistance, right? We just knew that. Or also in my case, growing up in my time, I wanted to be Nick from a TV show called The Big Valley. Some of you won't remember that. I had the cowboy hat on. Nick always wore black. Google it when you go home today. All right? Guys, we grew up wanting to be the hero. We grew up wanting to be the hero. We wanted to fight the battles. We wanted to win the girl. Now, we were younger. We just wanted to fight the battles. We didn't want to win the girl. But then when girls came under the radar, it was fighting the battles and winning the girl. Which is why these types of movies are still one of our favorites today. If we go around the room and have guys share their movies, so somewhere along the way, I will bet you that there's a battle to be fought and there's a beauty to be won. Guys, we grew up wanting to be heroes. But here's what happened. Reality set in. Reality set in. Somewhere along the way, we probably disappointed, probably failed the women in our lives. We may have been emasculated. Sherry talked about that last week. In the process, we took the cape and we just threw it aside. We gave up the dream of being a hero. But guys, listen, hey, do you know one thing a hero has? What all heroes have? You know what they have? They have loyalty. Heroes have loyalty. So guys, when we engage in conflict with our wife or conflict with our girlfriend or conflict with the person that we're engaged to, when we engage in conflict, we actually show that we're willing to fight for the relationship by fighting in it. Now, ladies, let me pick on you for a second. And what I need to tell you, you already know. This is common information for you, but I'm going to tell you anyways. All right, here's the deal. We guys are not wired for deep, soul-probing, gut-wrenching, spill-your-heart-out conversations. We are just not drawn up that way. It's just not part of our DNA, all right? That's just not who we are. Mark Gungor leads a conference called Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. And in his conference, Mark talks about the difference between the female brain and the male brain. And he says that there's something in the guy's brain that ladies just don't get. You just don't understand. And that's this. In the guy's brain, we have what's called the nothing box. Every guy has this. Look at the guy next to you, and they're nodding their head. We all have the nothing box. And you know what's in the nothing box? Nothing. There's nothing in our nothing box. And ladies, you need to hear this. This is where we guys go to live and to do nothing. It's a great place. It's a happy place. It really is. So, you know, and for us, this always happens when we're driving. And Sherry will look at me, like we've got vacation coming up. I'm just dreading the drive to North Carolina because this will be the time when I'm driving and she'll look and say, so what are your thoughts? What's going on in your heart and mind? And you may have these moments too when you ask the guy this, and you know, when we turn and we go, nothing. We are absolutely right. There is nothing going on. Nobody's home. We're not lying. We're not trying to skirt the conversation. We just opened the lid and climbed in and we're happy in here. Right? So, we do. Standing ovation from the guys. We love our nothing box. Most of us are in this box right now. All right. Ladies, you cannot relate at all because you have no such thing as a nothing box. Your box would say the everything box.
All the time,
like everything. Dirty laundry and kids' conversations, your life group material, what happened during days of our lives, all gets shoved. 24, it all gets shoved in here. And when we go on trips, you decide it's time to spring this open and dump it out on us. But we don't want anything in our nothing box. Okay? Just had to get that out.
So you're saying there really is nothing in that nothing
There's nothing
box?
going on. You know, it's funny. It's funny because when I take long trips with my boys, if it's sometimes just the two or three of us, like I took two of my kids and went over to the Notre Dame spring game, and on the way over to South Bend, I looked at Nathan and I said, so Nathan, what are you thinking about? Like right now, as we're driving, we're on the Indiana Turnpike, what's going on? You know what he said? Nothing. See, it develops at a young age. Now, listen, we can laugh about it. I get that, right? That really is a difference between males and females. But here's my point. My point is, where's the balance? Because for any relationship to work, there's got to be balance. There just has to be balance. So guys, I have an idea. You may not like me for this, and you may not come back next week, but I'm going to unpack it nonetheless. Let's just see how this flies, okay, guys? If in the last 6 months you have engaged in a hobby or an activity that you passionately love this much, and you have had a significant conversation with your girlfriend, spouse, or other this much, chances are things are not balanced, all right? Things may be a little out of whack, and I can almost predict with uncanny accuracy the forecast of your relationship. If you have been involved in a hobby or activity this much, have had a significant conversation this much, you probably have a chilly, stale, stagnant climate going on in your relationship. Guys, all I'm asking is that we work on bringing balance. And ladies, that goes your way too. Working out some balance to this, because here's why this is so important. I am, especially since we stepped into 321, I'm probably even before then, I am increasingly aware of men who have emotionally checked out of their marriages. I am. The guys who have been with me for the last 7 years, we've all gone through kind of this transformation of re-engaging in our marriages because a lot of us we just emotionally checked out. Now hear me. I know you're still there. I applaud you for that. You're there. You're day in, day out. You're in your chair. But they've emotionally checked out. They've not engaged. And hear me. I understand For some of you, why that's natural. For some of you, maybe that was modeled for you as a kid when you were growing up. Dad went out and worked, he brought home money, made a living for everybody, but that was about the extent of it. You know, Dad was there, he provided, but Mom was the one that was really engaged. And here's another one. After 25 years of doing student ministries, I am grieved by the number of men who have emotionally checked out with their kids. They just have checked out, man. Again, they're there, but they're not engaged with their family. They're not engaged with their kids, and that just doesn't grieve my heart. That's a big reason, and a lot of honesty on why we have started 321. Why our guys' life groups exist the way that they do is to help re-engage, to help free guys to re-engage in relationships and to re-engage with their family. Because I don't know if somewhere along the way, we got the idea this was the manly thing to do. Like, this is what guys do. At some point, we just check out. Again, maybe that was modeled for you, so that's what you know, and that's what you've enacted on. But guys, just to be pointed today, if somehow we think that's the manly thing to do, we have got a messed up view of marriage and of family. We just do. Because a godly husband, a man's man, loves his wife as Jesus loved the church. He leads her, he serves her, he engages with her. A real man engages with his kids. He loves his kids. He teaches them what it means to respect the Lord and have wisdom in the Lord. That's what a real man does. A real man engages in those things, and a real man shows courage. And do you know what a cousin to the word courage is? It's the word loyalty. The word loyalty. Now, guys, I am not saying, ladies, don't hear this. I'm not saying every day go home and have a gut-wrenching, soul-probing, deep-hearted conversation because God knows that would kill most of us. All right, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying if we are constantly giving off the impression that I don't have time, I don't want to engage, I don't want to deal with this, you're kind of all on your own, I'm just telling you, we're being disloyal. We are being disloyal. And you thought the days of being a hero were over? No way. No way. Guys, it is time to put the cape on. It's time to put the tights on. Okay, maybe not time for that. All right? But it is time for us to re-engage. It is time to get back into the game. It is time to fight in your relationship by fighting for your relationship. So today, if you're a conflict avoider, like me, if you're a conflict avoider, we need to have a mental adjustment. And here's our mental adjustment. Conflict avoiders need to think this: I'd rather be bad at conflict than disloyal. I'd rather be bad at conflict than disloyal. So when you feel the tendency, like I do, to resign or to retreat, you have to say to yourself, no way. No way. I am not going to take the easy way out. I'm not going to back out on this relationship. I'm not going to resign. I'm not going to retreat. I am going to engage because they are worth it and the relationship is worth it, and I want to be loyal because the person on the other side of you, hear me, hey, the person on the other side of you is worth the fight. Aren't they? Aren't they? So that's our word for conflict avoiders.
All right, conflict engagers. Solomon uses a word here too that I probably would not have put in for conflict engagers, and that is the word kindness. Again, Proverbs 3:3. Never let loyalty and kindness leave you. Tie them around your neck as a reminder. Write them deep within your heart. So if you're a conflict engager, you would probably look at this word as, or you would probably put in like self-assurance or self-confidence or just not kindness. Kindness just seems a little too nice. And when you're in a conflict and you're engaging in that and you're sharing your opinion and you're debating and you're going all of this, kindness is just a little wimpy. So what in the world is Solomon talking about? Well, let's take a look again at the business world because a lot of research and business management experts has been talking about conflict resolution within the workplace for quite a while. And what they tell us is that the number one problem within the workplace that most people the biggest mistake that most people make as it relates to conflict resolution is the term they use, the fundamental attribution error. So what in the world is the fundamental attribution error? Well, as an example, when management makes a decision and they tell the employees, and the employees go, great, there goes management shoving down another decision down our throats. In that moment, the employees have just made the fundamental attribution error. And likewise, when management watches the employees respond that way and the management says, there they go, never have buy-in, never get what we're doing, management have just committed the fundamental attribution error. So what is it? Very simply put, when two sides assume motive of the other side, that is the fundamental attribution error. See, the minute there's a conflict in the relationship, whether at school or at work, and the minute anyone says, there you go again, there she goes again, you're committing the fundamental attribution error. You have assumed motive. Now, let's be honest. It is extremely rare that any of us ever assumes a positive motive from the other side. We naturally, and I'll say 99.9999% of the time, we assume a negative motive. You did this because you don't like me. You did this because and this happens in my own home. You always think, you always do. That is the fundamental attribution error. You are making an assumption of the other person's motive. Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he says, what we really need to do is I want to seek to understand before I am understood. Now, this is going to be a huge, huge, huge shift for conflict engagers, because again, we've already got our opinions, we've got our thoughts, we're ready for the debate, we're ready to dive in. And what we need to do is to say, just kind of stop and go, rather than assume why you just made that decision, would you explain to me so that I can understand? I'm going to let you go first rather than me jumping to a conclusion or, again, just shutting that relationship down. The amazing thing is the scientists are just now putting all of this together. Solomon was talking about this thousands of years ago. Solomon said in Proverbs, you guys, if you would just do the best thing for your life and for your relationships, which is to listen first. Listen first. You will begin to lay a great foundation to having the climate change within those relationships. Conflict engagers, this is something for you. What you need to, management, the mental change, I like that phrase. The mental change is simply be able to do this, and it won't be real simple. I want to hear as much as be heard. I've got my point to make, but I want to understand where you're coming from first. I know not always, but usually will say to Greg, I go, blah, 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 and they'll say, so what do you think? Well, now the better thing would be to say, so what do you think? Well, you keep it all in and just keep your mouth shut and hear
Don't worry, I won't hold
first.
this over her today, tomorrow.
What?
Nothing.
We are working on it, okay. So that is really the challenge for all of our conflict engagers. And again, why is this difficult? It's because usually we're thinking we're right. 98% of the time we're right. The other 2%, we're just having a bad day. So we've got to realize that when we do this, we are shutting the other person down. We may be right. That's beside the point, because if we're right to the ruin or to the price that we are paying for the relationship, what have we been right about in the end? Nothing. So here, Solomon gives us loyalty and kindness.
And these are both so important. I mean, conflict avoiders, I'd rather be bad at conflict than be disloyal. Conflict engagers, I need to hear first before I'm heard. I mean, there's things we actively all need to engage with today if we're going to resolve conflict. Because, hey, guess what? Conflict is always going to happen. You're going to continue to experience conflict. And Solomon is saying, hey, guys, if you will just be loyal in your relationships, and if you will just extend kindness in your relationships, you're going to create a great climate to be on the other side of you. Remember that question, what's it like to be on the other side of me? If I will extend loyalty and engage in kindness, I'm creating a great environment for the people that are on the other side of me. So there is a two-part challenge as we wrap up today. Obviously, we had the word to conflict avoiders and conflict engagers, but here are two challenges we have to leave you with this week. This is your homework. Challenge one is relatively simple because all of us, as we said earlier, all of us have this collection of relationships, and chances are there's at least one relationship in your life that needs a climate change. So challenge number one is really easy. We're going to ask you to pray. We're going to ask you to pray. Now, if you're somebody who's here this morning and you believe in God and you engage in prayer, you believe prayer is effective, we're going to ask you to pray. And here's what we're going to ask you to pray. God, would you put on my mind and in my heart the name of that person, that relationship that needs to be resolved? Now, chances are very few of you need to pray because the entire time we've been talking this morning, that person's been right here or right here. You know what I mean? We're great, by the way. We're good. Need the elders after the service. So the first part's easy. I need you to consider what's that one relationship this week, the one relationship that you need to make a climate change in. And then here's the second part of the challenge, which is far more difficult. He'd ask you to set up a time to get together with him. Yeah, I know this is going to take courage. I know it's going to take guts. But part one doesn't work without part two. Make an appointment, get together at Starbucks, get together and have a conversation. And as you sit down in the conversation, all you want to communicate is, you know what? I value this relationship, and I want to make sure this relationship is right. And I know in the past we've had conflict, we have disagreement, and my point today is not to go back there at all and deal with that. My point is just to say, I want to be loyal to the relationship. I want to extend kindness because you matter to me. The relationship matters to me. Forgiveness needs to be offered wherever it needs to be offered, but I value what's going on. I want to get this relationship right. So this week, all of us, let's have the loyalty. Let's extend the kindness that's necessary for us to restore some of these broken relationships that we've been in. Because here's the truth. The truth is that person and that relationship, they are worth the fight. They're worth the fight. So let me pray over all of us. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. I just want to pray over all of us these words. And now may the Spirit of the living God go with you this week, and may he give you the courage to show loyalty and extend kindness. May the Spirit of our great God who loves you so much go with you and bring healing to that relationship. May the Spirit of our great God give you the courage and the words to say in that moment, and may the Spirit of our great God be on the side of the person who's going to be on the other side of those words in your conversation. And may God do what only God can do by bringing healing and restoration to your relationship. And I pray this in the unbelievably matchless name of Jesus Christ, our Savior, who died for us and loves us and goes with us today. I pray this for you and over you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, to close this morning, we want to share the story of two women who have experienced a lot of what we talked about today and how they have fought through to restore their friendship. Here is their restoration story.
Elizabeth and I became friends because of our husbands. When Greg and I got married, I started to get to know Tim, and then when Tim and Elizabeth started dating, as it got closer to their wedding, I started to get to know Elizabeth, and it was a really easy friendship. We were both going to be in the same kind of position of being newly married together and doing a lot of those first things together, setting up our homes and just settling into being newlyweds. So it was an easy friendship because of those similarities, and also she was just an easy person to talk to.
She is very outgoing. She makes you feel comfortable when she first gets to know you, and she just really shows a genuine interest in you. And after Tim and I got married, we started hanging out together, doing a few things together.
So Elizabeth and I both agree that we had never had the type of relationship, the type of friendship with any other woman. So I think that intimacy in another relationship with a woman is a very special relationship where you can really be transparent and be honest. And I had never experienced that in my life.
Having a best friend, a lot of times you say that, but I really have never experienced a friendship like the one I have with Jennifer. We're opposites, but yet in the beginning of a relationship, that's really cool and fun. And then as you get through some valleys in your relationship, like the infertility or just differences, it really starts to come out in your relationship and how you act. And I know, at least for us, we did not know how to fight fair. As much as Jennifer was insecure and wanted what I had, Tim and I very much looked at Jennifer and Greg's relationship, and yes, they did not have children, but they both were working, they could go off to different places on vacation whenever they wanted, and we were stuck at home. And I got to stay at home, which was a great privilege, but with that comes limited income and things like that. In a relationship, we really just hurt each other. We both had insecurities, we both had jealousies. That was probably the first issue that we had, and then everything kind of built on that, because you try to go throughout your relationship and patch that up, but then it just more layers just happen, and then our final breakup, sadness, whatever you want to call it, was probably around 2003 that we just could not put ourselves through that anymore. I felt like I tried, I loved her so deeply, I cared so much, but our differences were so great that I was trying to do things and she would take it personally and vice versa, and I just didn't want to hurt her anymore. I mean, I cared so much that if my friendship was going to hurt her that bad, then we just shouldn't be friends. So we were not friends for about 5 or 6 years. Okay, in 2007, our husbands were part of a guys group that surrounded Greg Howder, and they had something unique. Not too often you have a group of guys that get together, share their feelings and their struggles, and walk alongside each other. And that was going amazingly well. All of the guys thought it'd be a great idea for us ladies to join and have their own group, just the ladies group. And while that sounded awesome, and we were really excited about God doing a great work, there was a problem because Jennifer was going to show up. God speaks to me a lot of times, and I will do whatever he says, but it takes a little bit of nudging first. We both would show up, and sometimes we would make sure our other friend would join us so we could get through the night together, but it was not working because you can't have a huge conflict and try to share and grow deep spiritually. It just doesn't work. God spoke to me and just said that I needed to ask for forgiveness and just apologize for everything I've ever done to hurt her and move forward. It didn't matter what she said to me. It didn't matter if she ever changed. It was all about me and my heart issues and how I was going to move forward.
Looking back at Elizabeth and I's friendship, there's many lessons that we have learned, and I wish I would have never hurt her through this whole process. I wish I could take that back. But looking at where our relationship is now, I appreciate the journey that we've gone through to where we are today. Forgiveness is huge. The fact that she forgave me for everything that I've done to hurt her over the years is incredible. It is the biggest gift that she's ever given me. And the gift of friendship, or the gift of her forgiveness, is huge. Regardless of where God has taken you and all the great things that you've been blessed with, that it is a privilege to be the cheerleader behind her and cheering her on as God is taking her through in some really hard things of your life, but feeling the blessing of being an encourager behind you and then cheering you on as to see where God has brought you is an amazing privilege.
When we go through trials, so many times we want to run from them. We do not want to go through the trials, and our friendship was great at the beginning. It had its trials, but really that's how every relationship is. What I learned, the greatest thing, was how to communicate and not hurt. And so many times when we hurt people, we are hurt people as well. Our insecurities, you start assuming things. And when you give other people grace, you will receive much grace. So what I've learned is to not assume the worst. Our relationship is great and we're best friends, but it's changed over the years just because of life circumstances. It doesn't mean that we always get to see each other, we always hang out, but we know in our heart of hearts that we are praying for each other, we want the best for each other, and we now know how to communicate and don't look at differences as a negative. So many times I have been envious of Jennifer because she's so outgoing and she has all of these wonderful traits, But instead of looking as a negative, just say, wow, that's really cool, I can learn from her, or we can complement each other through that process. I'm Elizabeth,
And I'm Jennifer.
and this is our restoration story.